In this section, we are going to explore the mystery of evaluating analogical arguments. To give an analogy is to claim that two distinct things are alike or similar in some respects. Here are two examples. Capitalists are like vampires. Like the Earth, Europa has an atmosphere containing oxygen. Analogies themselves are not arguments, but analogies are often used in arguments. Remember the logic of reasoning by analogy? A is similar to B in certain respects. A has some further feature X, therefore B also has the feature X. This is our mom's analogical argument. You are my son, and Xiaoming is Aunt Li's son. Why can't you be as successful as Xiaoming? When given a talking to like this by our moms, we feel somehow speechless. Our moms are making a valid argument. We and Xiaoming are both mom's boys. This is an analogy to support mom's argument. But at the same time, we feel something wrong. Xiaoming and we are different individuals. In this sense, our mom's analogy is not appropriate. So how should we evaluate the strengths of an analogical argument? Here are some considerations. First, the truthfulness of the analogy. We need to check that the two objects being compared are indeed similar in the way assumed. For example, one argues, this novel is supposed to have a similar plot like the other one we have read, so probably it is also very boring. To evaluate this argument, we need to first check if the two novels indeed have similar plots. If the two novels actually have completely different plots, one being an office romance and the other is a horror story, then the argument is obviously unacceptable. The second question we need to ask when evaluating an analogical argument is if the analogy is relevant to the thesis. This means even if the two objects being compared are similar, we also need to make sure that those aspects in which they are similar are actually relevant to the thesis. For example, suppose two books are alike in that their covers are both green. Just because one of them is boring does not mean that the other one is also boring, since the color of a book's cover is completely irrelevant to its contents. In other words, if we use an analogy to support a thesis, the similarities shared by the two parts of the analogy must be able to increase the probability of the thesis. Now let's move on to see the third thing we need to consider when evaluating analogical arguments. Do the two objects being compared share a sufficient number of similarities? If we discover a lot of shared properties between two objects, and they're all relevant to the conclusion, then the analogical argument is stronger than when we can only identify one or a few shared properties. Suppose we find out that novel X is not just similar to another boring novel Y with a similar plot. We discover that the two novels are written by the same author, and that very few of both novels have been sold. Then we can justifiably be more confident in concluding that X is likely to be boring novel. This is like what we've talked about evaluating generalizations. Remember, we have to make sure the specific cases we use to support the generalization are sufficient in number. When evaluating analogical arguments, we also need to consider this, because both types of the arguments are inductive arguments. Another question we need to consider when evaluating analogical arguments is about diversity. Here the issue is, whether the two objects being compared share similarities of the same kind or of different types. Let's come back to our mom's argument. Suppose Xiaoming and you went to the same high school, same university, and majored in the same subject. These similarities can, in some degree, support mom's thesis that you should be as successful as Xiaoming. But these similarities so far are all about one aspect, our educational background. Apparently, our success and achievement can be affected by many other factors, such as our own personalities, family background, our parents' parenting skills, or even luck. So next time, when your mom makes such arguments, tell her she should consider if you and Xiaoming are similar in all those key aspects that may change your lives. Now, at the end of this section, let me ask you a question. What do we need to do to make analogical arguments strong? We need to make sure the two parts of the analogy are truly similar in many of the different aspects that are relevant to the strengths of the thesis.